Ladies and gentlemen, our next session is yet another short keynote. The topic is the ambience for innovation at NASA and the takeaways for designing innovative products and solutions. As we all know, NASA has consistently delivered on difficult science and engineering projects that have pushed back the boundaries of the known and the unknown. What is unique ambience that promotes innovation at NASA? And can we create a similar intellectual environment in India? We couldn't have got a better speaker to take us through this. We have Dr. Amitabha Ghosh, Chair Science Operations Working Group for NASA Mars Exploration Rover mission. The rover represents $1 billion of strategic engineering assets and a showpiece of NASA's solar system exploration program. As a chair, Dr. Ghosh is responsible for coordinating and overseeing the science and engineering teams, and it's responsible for the final deliverables, an engineering plan that is uplinked to the rover each Martian day. In 1997, as a member of the Mars Pathfinder mission, Dr. Ghosh conducted chemical analysis of rock and soil. He analyzed the first ever Martian rock, which remains, and incidentally, the first rock analyzed from any other planet. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you, Dr. Amitabha Ghosh.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to this meeting. It has been an incredible experience for me as well. I have come all the way from Washington, D.C., and the last 2 or 3 hours has been a learning experience. I think I've learned a lot, and I hope I can share some of my perspectives, and I hope I can intellectually stimulate you for the next half an hour. Let's see whether okay. So my cursor works, so that's a good thing. So what I will be talking about is the ambience for innovation and at NASA and what you can learn from it. So let me tell you how I came to think of this problem. So I have been a planetary scientist. That's what they call people who work on other planets. So I work on the Mars asteroids. So I have a PhD degree in planetary science, and I have a master's degree in supercomputing. So that's my background. So I've not really thought about in a management perspective. But I used to come to India several times to give talks on Mars. And so one such trip, I was driving to Pune, and there was someone who called me. There was someone who called me from Tata Sons and said that, Amitabh, what you do about Mars is incredible. Can you share what is so special about what happens within NASA so that we can learn what works within NASA? And so that got me thinking about innovation. Previously, I have been part of the institution without having thought deeply about what it means. Second, I used to get invites to be part of these technology festivals at IITs. So you must be familiar with these, and you probably sponsor a lot of these festivals. So this was Tech Fest, I think IIT Bombay. So it's not that easy to come away and attend these things for a couple of days. So what I was fascinated is the richness of the program at Tech Fest. So there were robotic competitions, there was everything you could think of, and when I passed out of IIT, all we did was Spring Fest and we had a rock band. So that was fascinating. Okay, so I show up there, and what I discovered was the organizers of Tech Fest organized Tech Fest so that they can put it on their resume to get management jobs. It is not that they were interested in engineering that was spurring them to participate in Tech Fest. The third sobering statistic which I had is I'm in touch with a few of the directors, ex-directors and present directors of the IITs. So one gentleman told me that there has been a drastic shift of the young towards management. So, for example, if you look at IIT Mechanical Engineering Kanpur, where probably 80% of the folks would think of higher studies now, maybe just 5% do. And essentially, people come to the IITs to start preparing for CAT. So the average GPA has dropped from 9 to 7, and so his stark and dramatic warning was India's headed to a stage where after 10 years, India intellectually might be what it was at independence. So this is what got me thinking about India. Anyway, so with that background, let me just start proceeding. So let's start by defining innovation. So innovation has become a buzzword. It's heard too often in too many contexts. So I thought it's best to really define what I'm talking about here. I'm not saying the other definitions are incorrect. It's just that here we'll in my talk, I'll just discuss just one type of innovation, and which is when you essentially try to move the boundary between the unknown. Or, so it can be a fundamental scientific discovery, or it can be something like the discovery of the iPhone or the iPad, which is a fundamentally new application no one had thought about. So it has to be fundamentally new. So if you think of innovation, think of this. So as a society, as an economy, we pay a disparate amount of importance to be at the frontier. So if you think the first company who made the iPad was Apple, and so the second person has it's perhaps the second company is going to be far behind. Same in science. If you make a breakthrough, you are the first person making the breakthrough. Nobody knows the second person who worked on that same problem. So it's like, we think of people landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong was the first person who walked on the moon. You don't know the two other people. A lot of people don't know that the Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins was also there. So we do care, and innovation and being at the frontier has its real benefits in terms of science and in terms of the money that you make. So what I will not address in my talk is process innovation. And the other thing that in here, a lot of times, the word capability and innovation are confused. So I'm not talking of capability building. So let's talk about innovation. Okay, this is going on its own. So please, I want to control that. Okay. So what is innovation? Innovation is essentially, if you think about it, it's a specialist who is doing work at the frontier. So it is not a generalist, it's a specialist. Somebody who does something very specific, he's doing something at the frontier. So it's exceptional work, and it's work on the frontier, and that is innovative work. And let me add a little qualifier here. A lot of times, this innovative work is done by people who are young. So maybe below 30, below 40 tops. So mine is perhaps not the age where you are really innovative. The best work that you do is perhaps in your 20s. So, okay, so that is the definition of innovation, but you are part of an industry. I don't think if I told you that I found a novel discovery about Drosophila or the fruit fly, or a novel way to go to Saturn, I don't think you care. So the whole thing is, it has to be monetizable. That is what gets industry kicking. So it has to be monetizable, which means it should address a market need, and it should be at the right price point. It should be able to, you should be able to sell it. So that's what gets industry going. Now, so it's very important to remember that innovation is really a risk, a bet that you take, a stock that you buy which can yield in failure. And so so it is very important to, when a company is trying to be innovative, it should also know that there is also a good likelihood that you fail. So you know, a lot of the companies that Kleiner Perkins, the venture capital firm out of Silicon Valley, buys, eventually don't make it. So there is a very high rate of failure. So it's a very dangerous game, but on the other hand, it's perhaps you have to play this game to survive. It's almost not possible in this global economy where a lot of regional advantages of regulation, etc., are not there to compete without being innovative. So let's go to the next slide. Let's drill a little deeper into what each of these points mean. So how do you do exceptional work? So you need intrinsic talent, you need the mental space for thinking, which is very important. So you need the raw materials, which is the talent. Then that raw material, which is your young engineer, needs the mental space to think. Then you need a very good strategy of how you're going to do this. So this is what I call the system engineering strategy. How do you develop your product, or how do you develop your mission? So it has to be a very well thought of, uncompromisable strategy. Then how do these, so you can argue that a lot of innovation is personal. So you have these big physicists coming up with seminal discoveries. They can perhaps work with their own equations in the quietness of their office. But a lot of innovation really requires cooperation between various individuals in different fields. So it's very important to have an efficient organizational design in place. And then finally, you should have a culture of innovation. Very hard to quantify, but I'll talk about it a little more. Second thing is, you need to do exceptional work, and you also need to work on the frontier. For this, you need to know where the frontier is. So let's go and drill through each of these points. So let's go through perception of the frontier first. So working on the frontier. So this is very important. I think a lot of folks work on problems that are not important enough to be solved, that cannot be solved, or has been solved already. So if you are doing either of the three, then you are not really working on the frontier. And I think if you think of anything which is around today, any of the products that you are around today, and you are trying to get into that game of designing that product, that has been done. So you have to think of what is going to be hot in the next 5 years. So for example, at NASA, right now, Mars is the present. The future is perhaps the moons of Saturn. They have found oceans under the crust of some of the moons of Saturn. So how do you access those oceans? How do you send a mission? How does it penetrate the crust? How does it navigate into the ocean? So that's the future. So we have moved on from Mars in that sense. So it's very important to pick the problem that you want to work on. And some miscellaneous points here. So if you're really working on the frontier, the question of intrinsic talent is automatically solved. So you already have the best people come to you to work in your company. Well, not always do you exactly do frontier work. And so even in all innovative organizations, there are routine stuff which needs to be done, from system administration to image processing to you name it. Not everything is going to be innovative. But if you can somehow tie that work to the overall context of change that you are creating, it helps motivate the individual and highlight the novelty and the uniqueness of the work. So let me give you an example. So in India, one of the software companies, their motto is that our goal is to serve the customer. So that is what an engineer who's hired on the first day gets in a letter, that our motto is to serve the customer. If you join Apple 10 years back, you would get a letter from Steve Jobs saying that this is your opportunity to change the world. You're going to work on something which is going to be fundamentally so different, and it is going to change the way humans live. So that is what perhaps drives people to give their best. So in a small way, I experienced the same thing with my PhD advisor, who was NASA review panel lead at that time. And so he came to me, I was 23, just showed up from IIT, and he said that, you want to do something which is going to be a PhD manuscript which lies in the library, maybe 2 people read it, or do you want to do something which is going to change a lot of the science that we know? But if you choose the second, it's very possible that after 3 years, you will have nothing for your PhD thesis, because after 3 years, you'll figure out that's not possible. So anyway, so I, after a lot of thinking, chose the second. And it was an incredible ride, and I don't regret a moment of it. And I worked on, not Mars, but an asteroid. And 8 years later, I think NASA funded a mission to visit that asteroid based on some of the questions that I had posed in my thesis, which was under the testable hypothesis. So it's a very different messaging that goes out. It's really about motivating people. Okay, let's go on to the next point. So what about intrinsic talent? How important is it to innovation? So one, to start with, so there's a concept that one brilliant engineer is greater than 100 good engineers. So this is something very fundamental. You need really the best people. If you think of numbers, if you think of budgets, it's not going to work. If you need to get the best expert in a field, you need to get the best expert in the field. If you get 5 people instead of the best expert, it's not going to work. Okay. So you're looking for people who actually love the field. They are specialists and they love the field. So that's my second point. And these are eccentric perhaps sometimes, and they're not really thinking about the next increment. They're not really thinking about money. They have this irrational love for the field, and they have perhaps concern of their career trajectory, and that's as materialistic as it gets. So the third point would be the ability to problem solve, original thinking and problem solve. Note that I think it's a third point. I think the passion for the subject is the second point. It's very, very important. So even if you were not the most intelligent guy in class, but you were passionate about what you're doing, you're going to do well. Then there are people who are super intelligent, but they don't do well because they don't pursue something consistently throughout their career. And the other thing that I found out is innovation really requires, particularly in team context, excellent communication skills. Because we don't innovate in isolation. If you are not able to communicate your innovation, it's not an innovation. Be it in science, be it in engineering. So it's very important to be a very good communicator. So as this conference might be teaching you, all the games, the rules of the game are changing. So right now, engineers should also be cognizant of the business model. So it's not that there's a management level, it's an engineering level, and one tells the other what to do. So this is done by Google, and so in Google, perhaps each engineer tries to be an own center of creativity, and they call this person the smart creative. So this is a topic which is not easily broached, but I think it's very important. So you have this person or a team of people who are into working on this innovative project. You need to give them the mental space to think. So you're trying to create some fundamental breakthrough. You need that mental space to think. Okay, so what does that mean? So it can mean a lot of things, as you probably read. Google helps people. They give out gourmet food, they have massages, and they have play activities. But I think it is very important to see where you are committing the time and the attention of these creative people. One of the things which I strongly recommend, and I've seen that works, is the ability to telecommute. Why will you waste 2 hours in traffic in San Francisco or in Bangalore when you can perhaps do this over WebEx? In NASA, a lot of our meetings, even our some high-level meetings, happen over WebEx. In fact, if you want to really meet someone face-to-face, then they ask you, what really is the matter? What is it that you cannot say in a meeting? And the last point here, which I think it's very important for the perspective of mental space, is if someone, so the issue of work-life balance. 2 things here. Now, one is the individual should not be so swamped with work that he does not have a life outside of work. So, I really believe that all play and all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And I think work-life balance is important for women and for parents in general when they have children. So, if you have such a trying schedule that forces people to make either choice, then they will not be at their creative best. You should just remember that there's going to be a cost. Okay. So the system engineering strategy is the process by which you conduct your process of innovation collectively. So this really needs to be very well thought of. So this really is going to make sure that you don't have to go back and do your homework. It needs to be a systematic approach and not a make rules as you go along approach. And efficient organizational design, again, I think is very important. The best setting for innovation, I feel, is the skunk works model. It was invented by Lockheed. And essentially what it says is that you have maybe 1 or 2 functional layers and then maybe 1 supervisory layer. So, so there is not a chain of command that a decision has to go through. So if you have 3 people between the ground level engineer and the CEO, or 6 people, so you can absolutely be sure that innovation is not going to happen because it's going to get lost in the bureaucracy and going to get lost in communication. So again, this is very commonly used at NASA. At Jeff Bezos has this 2 pizza rule that if you have a meeting and 2 pizzas are not enough for the entire crowd, then you probably have too many people. So the other thing which is to be stressed is that sometimes you need to. So there's going to be a role in the organization and a role in the development team, and both don't have to map to each other. So there's sometimes there is a senior person in a development team might be working in a junior position. So he has to, at that time, take orders from the junior person. And there's nothing bad about that. There's nothing shameful about that. It happens all the time. That really helps the senior person understand what goes through the mind of someone, a junior engineer, and it delivers the best product. The culture of innovation is the toughest to quantify. So, it's so typical in Southern California, it's very hard to really put your finger on it. So I have listed a few factors on my 3rd point, and it will be very tough to really quantify it, but you have people who are not that serious, who are playful, who are sharp, who are respectful, who are tolerant of dissent, who welcome changes to the status quo, who respect each other's personal time, who respect each other's personal space, come from a very middle-class background. They have very significant hobbies, so they have an imaginative life outside of work. So it's very important. If you do not have enough imagination in your life, how can you be imaginative in your work? So I don't think it melts. You cannot certainly show up and be a very interesting person at work. So so I listed out some of the factors, and I'll tell you a little bit of what it is like at NASA. So we have a sense of the frontier, and we have a perception of the frontier. Obviously, NASA over the last, from the 60s, have aggressively pursued what is not known or what is not done. So a lot of the robotics technology, for example, which is in UAVs, was developed in the Mars program. A lot of the camera technology, CCD technology, has come out of Jet Propulsion Laboratory, long before anyone thought there is even a commercial application to it. So obviously, there is a perception of the frontier. Coming to the first point, which is intrinsic creative talent. Because we work on frontier problems, there is no problem in getting creative people. So we get very good applications from the best people all over the world, including the US. So that's not a problem. System engineering strategy is what sets NASA apart from many organizations. This is what I would say is the strongest point. The way that a project is executed is so well developed and so developed in such granularity that this really increases project reliability, and there is very little chance for error. So I'm giving you an example. Of course, space is a frontier which is unknown, so failures happen. But look, if you look at our Rover program, the rovers were supposed to last for 3 months. And so they were launched in 2003, so landed in 2004. 3 months takes you to March of 2004. Now we are in 2015. So 11 years later, they are still working. So this is because perhaps of this incredible system engineering model that is in place. The efficient organizational design. So again, we have a very flat organization, not many bosses, so maybe 2 levels, with one supervisory level, like one management level, who does not interfere. So you can basically do your work in peace without a constant interference from management. And the culture of innovation. That's very hard to quantify, but it is certainly there at Jet Propulsion Laboratory at NASA. Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about India. So 30 years back when I was, 20 years back, sorry, that's too much. 22 years back when I was receiving my degree from IIT Kharagpur, the convocation speaker told us about India's backwardness in terms of R&D, research papers, and patents. So 20 years later, no matter what metrics you look at, maybe the number of published papers, maybe the number of patents, maybe the number of researchers per 10,000, India lags the West, China, and sometimes even countries like Brazil. So not really much has changed, I would say. So that is a little bit of a sobering part. But the exciting part is, I think, right now change is perhaps a question of survival. And so perhaps it's going to happen. And I do believe there are 3 reasons perhaps the change will happen. So I think if you look at the first point, the labor arbitrage model, which was so guaranteed in between 2000 and 2005 maybe, it suddenly doesn't look like it's going to last forever. So as a software industry, perhaps you have a sense that there are already some projects where customers want real innovation, real partners in their progress. Second is, with the opening up of India, world-class companies have come to India. And then the Indian players have to compete. So, the Indian automotive industry suddenly has to compete with Honda and Renault and Ford. And the customer will obviously choose the best product. You know, the same thing happened in the US in the 1990s. Toyota and Honda used to make better cars, and the GMs of the US, they were very complacent. But in the end, so they tried a lot of tricks, buy American, etc. But obviously, the customer will choose the best product. So the Indian industry has to completely come up and be in the same plane as their global peers. Otherwise, there is no reason why even Indian customers will buy Indian products. Okay. So we have the third point, the Make in India initiative. It's incredible that our Prime Minister has introduced that. But at some point, I think, as one of our first speakers in the first session, maybe Samir Yagnik was pointing out, at some point, you have to also innovate in India. You at least have to have some Indian innovation, some capability. So this is becoming a question of survival. So you cannot just say that give us anything and we are going to make it, but we really don't have any core capability. Okay. And why is innovation very important globally? Okay, this was touched upon by the second speaker. So recall he had a slide that said that you know, people will want more and more personalized products. So that is in the second point. So let me go through the first point first. Most of the standard traditional business models assume scarcity of different things. One is scarcity of information. So you know, let's think of, you know, you're trying to buy a CD. You would have bought it from your neighborhood store, but you know right now that somebody in Gurgaon is selling it for cheaper, so you can get it from Flipkart. Scarce distribution resources. So market access. So previously, you know, if you're a small CD seller in Gurgaon, you never had access to a large area of customers. Now, courtesy Flipkart, you do. Then you had this scarce shelf space or scarce choice. Like, you know, Walmart used to famously charge companies a premium for their products to be displayed on the shelf. So, you know, if it was an eye-level shelf, then that was the most premium. If the shelf was towards the ground, then there was less desirable. So that again has gone away right now. With online shopping, you can do anything. There's no shelf space concept. And there was scarce capital. And right now, because the barrier to entry is so low, a lot of companies can come in and be in these businesses without much of a capital. So my second point is all these four are much easier available. And so it is very important to realize that traditional players who relied on these four factors for a business advantage are not going to have the same business advantage. So in the end, product excellence and services excellence is going to be the paramount to business success. So because of these reasons, both in the Indian context and the global context, I think innovation is slightly more required. So I think 20 years back, it was more like a catchword. It was something nice you say in a speech, and then you can forget about it until the next convocation. But here, I think this is really a matter of survival, because unless some of the industries innovate, there is a real threat to existence. Okay. So let me see. So there was a slide after that, but never mind. There was a few slides after that. Okay. That's better. Okay, so here I will talk a little bit about my take on India. So again, it's from my own experience. It's my observations, not really advocating any solutions here, but just my observations from flying in and out of the country, being at various campuses of universities as well as companies, meeting a few of the leaders. So I will talk of what sense I got from 3 layers, from the ground level engineers, from the middle managers who manage innovation, and to the top CEOs who see CXO suite that funds innovation. So, so this is my, these are my thoughts about the ground level engineer. So as all of us know that, the Indian academic system emphasizes rote learning, so so there's a failure to think at some point. So there are more implementers than thinkers. So I'm not saying these are observations. It can be based on what the industry needs. It can be good or bad. So there is a tendency. Technical jobs are not cool. Engineering jobs are not cool. Engineering is not cool. Science is not cool. Everybody wants to be in management. So IM is cool. So there's another thing which I noticed is that communication skills have probably gone down a little bit. For civil engineers, mechanical engineers I've met fresh out of IITs, I've been surprised how less informed they are of the world and how unable to communicate their thoughts, how they are. I think a lot of the engineers are driven by, young engineers are driven by compensation. Many are required to work hours instead of being delivery-based. So a lot of companies still have 50 hours, 40 hours work week, which you have to clock in. If you don't, you get a letter from HR. So if you're doing innovation, how can you have a time limit? So that perhaps, so if you work for a multinational here, probably you don't have to work hours, but that's something which I noticed. And I also noticed that there is perhaps a sense of less collaboration, more competition in team setting. There is certainly a big capability gap between an average engineer in the East and the West, and there's also a productivity gap. In the middle management, I think the biggest problem is there are too many layers of middle management. It's the lack of a flat structure, which perhaps may not work, and sometimes there is, they work in silos, so that's an observation that I have. And in the CXO suite, this is the most interesting point. There's a fundamental risk averseness to funding something which does not add to the cash flow. So if this continues, so I think I know where it comes from. Fundamentally, I think CEOs and CXOs grapple with a specific investment, say $10 million in a specific project, when they are not able to assess what is the risk of failure and what is the return. And so what they do is they don't invest in it at all. And so if this does not really change, then it will be very difficult perhaps to be innovative, because at some point you have to take a very big risk. But here I think people are very good, the CEOs are very good at arriving at local solution by adapting existing technology, but not as good in identifying leapfrog initiatives that jump the competition or add market share or add new capabilities. So, okay. So since I am past the time limit, I will stop, and if you have questions, you can ask, but if you don't have questions, I also have run out of business cards, but feel free to email me, Amitabha, AMITABH, @marspathfinder.com. That's my address. So I have been asked that because of paucity of time, there'll be only one question, but afterwards you can always approach me and ask.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Excellent talk. But I'm going to kind of say something which perhaps does not align with what you've said here. I'm a coach consultant in national cultures, and I believe some of your observations are spot on in terms of how we behave versus the culture at NASA, etc. I think the need is to find things that fit naturally with our culture instead of trying to change the culture, because our culture comes from core values which we have inherited, which we are brought up in. A lot of speakers, a lot of particularly overseas speakers, tend to criticize our culture as not suitable for business. In my 30 years of working for international companies and now as a consultant, I've clearly proved what we need to do is to adapt or choose or find things that work well with our culture rather than trying to change it. You have any observations, any comments on that?
I absolutely agree with you. So I'll tell you why I agree with you. So I think the pathways to innovation are different. You're trying to, it doesn't have to be the Western way. It can be any way, so long it is done. You have to understand, so innovation has become a very fashionable concept. People just think of iPad and, very limited set of things. But there are many other things that you can actually be very creative on. And that does not have to, that can be anywhere. And that happens in India. And the first point which I said, that, the trajectory of being innovative can be different. So just 500 years back, if you visit the Taj Mahal, I'm not being, not religious or something, but if you just visit the Taj Mahal, imagine this was built 500 years ago, no CAD/CAM machines, no transportation systems. How did they do it? Really, nobody knows. So there were some things in place. Or you look at the Konarak temple. So certainly there were certain skills and innovations was really there. So a comparable building in the US is the White House, built around the same time as the Taj Mahal. So there's no point in guessing, which is architecturally superior. So yes, I'm completely with you. So it doesn't have to be culture. Culture, I'm saying, is because in the specific setting that it worked. See, I'll say something which might be controversial. Caste system. Caste system had its real downsides. But a father teaching the son, and then the grandson the trade, and this happened over generations. So there was certainly, there was no formalized learning, there was no universities, but it was all there in the family. So that's a fascinating question, and I absolutely agree with your point.
Very sorry to be a foul sport. We are really running out of time. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ghosh, for the insightful address. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause, please. May I invite Raghav Gullur, please, to come on stage. Raghav is a part of the NASSCOM Engineering Council. Please present a memento to Dr. Ghosh.
Thank you very much for both the mind-opening and the...
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.